Labour lost a traditionally safe seat in the recent by-election, and critics hit out at Starmer for what has been described in some cases as a two-tier tax deal that gives Indian workers a break while UK workers still pay. Welcome to Riks Europe, Paul Embery, trade unionist and writer.
Hello again.
So, first of all, how do you interpret Reform UK's win in Rancorn, where they won this traditionally safe Labour seat?
I think it's potentially very significant. They overturned a significant Labour majority. Rancorn and Helsby, the name of the constituency, is a very safe Labour seat, or was a very safe Labour seat. Rancorn is a traditional kind of working class northern town. The seat also contained more middle class villages, but it is or was a safe Labour seat. So for Reform to have won it, I think was in many respects a spectacular success. Whether you like Reform or not, there's no denying that it was a very significant achievement for them. But if you look also at the other elections that took place on the same day, there were local authority elections up and down England, and there were also some mayoral elections as well. Reform did pretty well in those elections too, and they took significant numbers of votes both off of the Tories and off Labour. They are now leading in most opinion polls that are carried out. So they have really imposed themselves on the discourse in this country. And I think that Labour and the Tories will both be worried about it. They ought to be.
What would you say are the main threats for Labour? Because it's not only Reform, right, that are a threat to Labour at the moment.
Well, we're into five-party politics in this country, in England particularly. I mean, it's mainly historically, certainly in our recent history, politics in England has largely been dominated by two parties, Labour and the Tories. The Lib Dems have been the third party. But that's really been it. But now politics is breaking out in all sorts of different ways. And you've got Reform, which, as I say, is now becoming a significant force. You've got Labour, you've got the Tories, you've got the Lib Dems now being joined by the Green Party, who are making inroads into the electorate and, did fairly well in the council elections, have now got members of parliament. They, up until recently, only had one member of parliament. They've now got a handful of members of parliament. And the old political... if you like, the tribal loyalties are breaking down. So there's quite a major realignment going on at the moment. So, as I said, in the elections last week, significant numbers of once traditional Labour voters in working class areas voted for Reform. There are, if you like, people on the more progressive side of politics, the more liberal side of politics, who are being pulled towards the Labour Party, the Green Party, the Lib Dems. The Tories don't seem to know quite what to do. It's almost like they've been caught in a pincer movement. They've always had a very kind of dominant liberal progressive wing in Parliament, much more so than the party at large throughout the rest of the country, their membership base. And some people in the Tory party are saying, we shouldn't try to follow Nigel Farage's style of politics. We shouldn't try to mimic Reform in our politics. Others are saying, look, if you don't do that from the Tory party's point of view, then you're not going to succeed. You've got to show traditional Tory voters that you're in touch with them, and that means following a Reform-style programme. So there's a big debate in the Tory party at the moment. There's a lot of internal bickering and grief going on in the Tory party at the moment, and their vote really is collapsing. And I think for the first time probably in my lifetime, there is a genuine there is a genuine possibility that the Tory party may end up becoming a more minor force in British politics, where it essentially just gets sidelined by reform. I think that is a real possibility. So it's a real period of flux in British politics at the moment, particularly in English politics, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
What would you say are the main reasons for this Labour loss? And what are media saying are the reasons? Because a lot of people say that they're not quite in touch with reality. Media don't quite want to admit the real reasons behind this loss for Labour.
Well, I think we need to remember that these were the first set of elections since the general election last July, when the Labour Party won a significant landslide in Parliament. But because of the nature of our electoral system, a party can win a very significant majority in Parliament without necessarily winning a huge share of the vote in the country. That's the way our first past the post system works. I mean, I support the first past the post system, but it is a bit quirky like that. And one writer described the landslide as a loveless landslide, which I think is true. People were so angry at the Tories and felt such a sense of betrayal at what the Tories had done or not done in some cases, that they put their vote in the Labour box, but without necessarily having a lot of affection for Labour. So Labour has always, to a certain degree, been living on borrowed time. And if it didn't move quickly in terms of delivery on some of the key issues for people, such as getting economic growth after years of stagnation and economic decline, such as getting a grip on the out-of-control immigration numbers, which the Tories completely failed to do, such as getting NHS, National Health Service, waiting lists down. If they didn't move quickly on some of that stuff, they were always going to find, I think, that the public could turn against the government quite quickly. And I think that what has happened. I mean, it's had some success on the NHS waiting list, but when it comes to the first of those two issues, the issues of the economy and immigration, there's really been no progress at all. The economy is still struggling. Immigration numbers are still out of control. We're still seeing that the boats arriving across the channel, the English Channel, on a daily basis. Labour hasn't got to grips with that. When you also then factor in other issues which are really weighing on people, the general sense of crime and lawlessness on the streets, a housing crisis, which I think is a national emergency. We've got a chronic lack of housing in this country. Net zero, which even Tony Blair a few days ago came out and said, look, it's frankly bonkers to ask the British public to continue to make sacrifices and to change their lifestyle when their impact on carbon and emissions is minimal. I think that is really beginning to anger people as well. All of that stuff is coming together. And I think the reason reform are cutting through is because in terms of management, in terms of delivery, people don't really see a lot between the current Labour government and the previous Tory government. Both if you like, have overpromised and underdelivered on some of the key issues. Both have followed that kind of very technocratic, globalist, liberal type of agenda, which I think most people in this country, most mainstream voters, have got little sympathy for. And the patience of voters, I think, has frankly expired when it comes to the Tories, and is in danger of expiring when it comes to the Labour Party. And I think that's why reform, I'm not a supporter of reform, but people in the country are seeing reform as a party that's going to shake the whole thing up, that is going to smash the status quo. It's fresh, it's got original ideas, it's got the people who have got the desire to do the things necessary to improve the country. I think we're in for a really interesting time over the next couple of years.
What policies do you think are proving most effective, particularly with working class voters that would have moved from Labour to Reform UK?
I think one of the key issues is immigration. Absolutely no question about that. Reform seems to have tapped into the mainstream position on immigration and the desire among millions of voters to get back control of the thing, because it is out of control. I mean, there's no denying it. I mean, back in the 1990s, net immigration into Britain was generally around the tens of thousands. And because of that, immigration wasn't really a major issue in the 1990s in this country. It kind of almost disappeared to a large degree from the main political agenda because people thought the system was being managed properly, the numbers were modest and manageable and so on. And then I think with the advent of the new global market at the turn of the century and globalization really starting to take effect in particularly our working class communities in terms of deindustrialization and rapid demographic change and so on. And then we had EU enlargement in 2004, and suddenly the numbers were off the charts. And this started to cause profound economic and social shocks in some working class communities. And for years, politicians of both the main parties, the Tories and Labour, said, yeah, we understand your concerns, we've heard them, we're going to get a grip on it. And for years, they failed to do it. That's largely what drove the Brexit vote, actually, in 2016. And still, even since then, they haven't got a grip on it. So then you get somebody, like Nigel Farage and Reform come along and say, look, we're the only people who's listening to you. We're the only people who shares your views on this. We're the only people with the ideas to be able to change things. There is no doubt that is, the key issue which Reform is tapping into, and that's why voters on both sides of the spectrum, former Labour voters and former Tory voters, are flocking to Reform in quite large numbers.
What are your views on the critics saying that this UK-India trade deal creates a two-tier tax system? Could you tell us more about this?
I mean, I have to say I'm not terribly worked up about it. I think when it comes to immigration and the impact on wages, for example, downward pressure on wages and the impact in terms of social and cultural cohesions in our communities, I think it's important to keep a view on the big picture. The main thing is doing much better at integrating people who come and in making sure that numbers are more modest. I don't think it's terribly wise for people who share that view, and I'm one of them, to get sidetracked into what we call the nitty-gritty small details of the India trade deal. I mean, you could argue that the politics of it was not terribly wise, given just what a toxic issue immigration has become and how much trust Labour has lost on it. But for me, it's not the big thing. The big thing is getting in place the measures at a national level to be able to regulate the system much better than it's regulated at the moment.
Do you think this critique and the people saying that they're unhappy because they're worried that it gives foreign workers an advantage, is this something that has an effect on also their numbers and people not wanting to vote or support Labour?
I'm not convinced that's a strong argument, particularly. They won't be paying national insurance, but at the same time, there are things that those Indian workers who come over won't be able to claim for in the way that British workers can claim for. So of all the criticisms that can be lodged legitimately at the Labour government and the previous Tory government over the issues of immigration, this is not a significant one for me. I don't think there's evidence that it's going to have a large impact on the numbers of people coming. I don't think there's any evidence it's going to have a significant impact economically or in encouraging firms. As I say, it applies just to workers of Indian firms, people who are actually just working in the UK for Indian firms, that it's going to have an impact in terms of wages and so on. There are much, in my view, bigger issues to focus on and bigger criticisms that we can lay at the door of the government and the opposition when it comes to the general issue of immigration.
What do you think that Labour could learn from this this loss? Sorry.
Well, whatever it is, it needs to learn it quickly because its support has plunged quite significantly since the election last year. It needs to. Many people out there still see Labour as a party for the professional and managerial classes and not for the working class anymore. As a party for social activists and urban liberals and student radicals. Now, I think to a certain degree, there are people at the top of the Labour Party who are trying to change that perception. They get it, if you like, and actually there's there's a group of MPs now, a caucus called the Blue Labour group of MPs, which are articulating the right ideas, I think, on issues like immigration. But unless you deliver on the key issues that are affecting people, you're not going to win support. And as I said, those three key issues are without doubt getting economic growth, making people feel more prosperous, putting money in their pockets, restoring, some degree of prosperity to the economy. The issue of immigration and getting a grip on it, there's no evidence that government's doing that to any great degree at the moment. And the record NHS waiting lists, which they're making some inroads into, but not fast enough for many people. Those are the three issues it needs to tackle, and they need to make progress on those issues really quickly. If not, I think Labour can kiss goodbye to winning the next election.
Yeah, because that's my final question. Do you believe that Labour could turn this around, and what would Keir Starmer need to do in that case?
Well, it's hard once that malaise has set in, and once the public has fallen out of love with you as a government, it's very hard to win back that trust and that support. 1992, the Tories were re-elected to the surprise of many people in a general election under John Major, and within 6 months the economy crashed. We had what was called in the UK Black Wednesday, where the Tories completely lost their reputation for economic competence, and we saw a serious recession in the country and repossessions of people's homes and businesses failing and so on. Once that had happened, and even in the years afterwards, the economy started to get back on its feet. We started to see growth and prosperity and so on, leading up to the 1997 election. Once that had happened, Black Wednesday in 92, the Tories were never going to win the 97 election because people had lost their trust in the Conservative Party, and they just couldn't win it back. And in 97, we saw Tony Blair came to power with a landslide majority. And the danger for the Labour Party is if that rot sets in, it becomes very, very difficult to turn it around. And they don't have much time left, frankly, unless there's significant delivery in the coming months, then I fear that the die will be cast for the next election.
Thank you very much, Paul Embery, trade unionist and writer.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching Riks Europe.